All right, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started with our Wednesday webinar. We're very excited this morning to have Brittany Salvador with us. My name is Dana Slowinski, and I am co-owner of the Family Recovery Centers. And I'm just going to take a minute to tell you a little bit about Family Recovery Centers for those of you that aren't as familiar. We are an adolescent and parent evening intensive outpatient program. And we have locations in Lake Bluff, Hoffman Estates, and St. Charles. And we are DBT based. We also do other experiential modalities as well. So we have art therapy and yoga therapy as part of our program. And then also two other program components I'd like to highlight. We do have, as I said, the parent involvement. So parents are actually on site with their children 50% of the time. So they are learning the DBT skills right along with their child, and then they're also doing their own work. So we're really diving into the family system and looking at family dynamics to hopefully make, kind of sustaining change throughout that family system and with that child that is with us. We work with a wide variety of maladaptive behaviors. So adolescents struggling with self-injury, substance use, mood disorders, depression, anxiety, ADHD, kind of a wide gamut. And then we also have a 24/7 on call. So our staff is available to patients and parents 24/7 to really help them skills coach through the moment in their own life. So not just when they're in treatment with us, but in moments where they might be struggling with urges to engage in any maladaptive behaviors. So we can help you walk them through different skills that they can use. So that is us in a very quick nutshell. If you have any questions or you want more information, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Ryan Bright, the other co-owner of the Recovery Centers. And we love these Wednesday webinars because we are able to partner with other community agencies and partners, and we really love our collaborative relationships with these partners. And so with that, we are having Brittany Salvador, LCPC, is gracious enough to be presenting with us today, and she is with Barrington Behavioral Health and Wellness. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Brittany.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's definitely a pleasure to be here, and what a fitting topic. June being Pride Month. I mean, my hair is covering it, but I've got my little Pride ribbon on for today. But suicide prevention in the LGBTQ plus community really hasn't been addressed as much as I think all of us clinicians and individuals could really benefit from. You'll see a lot of information, and I might inundate you with some statistics at first, but bear with me. All of this stuff is important in order to really understand how serious of an issue it is. Many of us have probably dealt with clients or families that have dealt with suicide, and it can be a really tragic situation. And so learning how to prevent it is so important. I have a few techniques that I've borrowed from the Trevor Project, which is a great resource for those of you that are looking for more resources. A lot of the statistics I've gotten have come from there. And then also on top of that, they just have a ton of great resources for people in the LGBTQ plus community. That being said, if you have questions, please feel free to type in the Q&A in the chat, and I will do my best to answer those as we go along. I will also save a little time at the end, hopefully, fingers crossed, to answer any other questions. My contact information is also in the end of the slides. So without further ado, here we go. So suicide is actually the second leading cause of death for LGBTQ plus individuals. So I presented the question here of why do you think that is? And of course, there's a number of reasons, and as I kind of have listed there on the right side, we have bullying, lack of support, increased risk for mental health issues, increased risk of substance use, barriers to access to mental health care, as well as discrimination. Getting a little bit more into detail of all of these, bullying, of course, is something that comes up in adolescence. It can come up in adulthood as well, but it really begins in adolescence. And that's usually when individuals are trying to figure out their identity. And so being kind of told that you're wrong or made fun of is definitely a risk when it comes to feelings of depression and kind of wondering, maybe should I be here, those types of things. So that's that's kind of why that one is there. And I'm sure you guys can guess some of this information, but I want to make sure that it's as thorough as possible. A lack of support. Thankfully, fingers crossed, this has been less of an issue probably since 2007. But there are still parents, family members, friends that can be non-supportive of LGBTQ plus individuals. Acceptance has gone up in the past few years, and I think that has kind of helped. But it's sad to know that people identifying as LGBTQ plus are feeling like no one really gets them. They feel very alone. They're not having people to talk to about some of the issues. And it's kind of leading right into that increased risk for mental health issues. You'll see a little bit later, but more or less, people that are LGBTQ plus tend to have an increased risk for anxiety and depression, largely because of the coming out process and coming to terms with their identity and many of the other things I've already mentioned, like bullying, lack of support. With that, of course, there's an increased risk of substance use, a way to self-medicate or to numb. And so I've found that to be true, especially in the young male population. And so I see that there's a question there potentially. No? Okay. There are also barriers to access to mental health care. So what I mean by that is a lot of times, for example, that lack of support, a kid comes out as anything in the LGBTQ plus community, and they're like, oh, I'd like counseling to figure this out, and the family either is not supportive of receiving counseling to assist with that matter, or that of course there can be poverty and other financial barriers. And then discrimination, right? Someone might actually be lucky enough to get into some type of counseling or get into a job, but then experience a lot of kind of discrimination or negative feelings about that. And so that's why, in a nutshell, suicide is the second leading cause of death for LGBTQ plus individuals. So here's all the facts that I was going to share with you guys. So particularly youth are more at risk. In fact, they're 5 times more at risk than their heterosexual counterparts. And so that's something really important to note, particularly working with the youth population. It's important to recognize that knowing how they're feeling, recognizing if they're feeling depressed, being able to see those clinical signs is so important. In fact, 40% of LGBTQ plus youth have actually considered pretty seriously ending their life in the last 12 months. These statistics are from the Trevor Project, I think from 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And so hopefully that can be a helpful piece of information for you. Additionally, 40% of transgender adults have reported having made a suicide attempt before the age of 25. So as you can kind of already see by some of these stats, the picture that they're painting is it's so important to intervene early, right? When you think of the age of 25, that's young. That's a young time to really be considering ending your life. And so, when more than half of people that identify in the T part of LGBTQ plus are feeling that way, that's pretty significant. And as I said, that lack of support is a huge risk for suicide. As it says here at the bottom, LGBTQ plus youth who come from highly rejecting families are 8.4 times as likely to have attempted suicide as compared to those who either had very low levels of rejection or none at all. And race does matter to some extent. American Indians or Alaskan Natives are most at risk, but everyone else pretty much across the board, more or less even, right around that 15 to 20% range in terms of past year suicide attempts. And so, suicide prevention when it comes to the the youth and working with them, race doesn't really seem to have a major factor. It's more that feeling of differentness with LGBTQ plus. Now that being said, it's important to be culturally sensitive, and there are definitely issues that do come up related to that. Even in my own practice, I have found, and I've found variances, of course, but I have found that because of the family culture, typically in Latino or Hispanic families, that I've found it's actually been a little bit more difficult to get people to accept. And then the religious aspect of those that are African American, that has also been a hurdle to overcome. However, all of these things can be overcome, but it's good to know what we're working with here. So moving on to the next bit, when you have an accepting adult, as you can kind of see by that little graphic there, it reduces that likelihood to attempt suicide by about 10%. You can see there, people with no accepting adult, about 30% rate for suicide attempts, and then people with at least one, it goes down by 10%. It's down to 17%. One interesting fact is, after gay marriage was legalized, specifically in Illinois, but also after DOMA and everything was overturned, there was a 7% decrease in LGBTQ plus teen suicide rates. I thought that was pretty interesting and significant. It shows just the importance of acceptance. So as a clinician, that's something I always try to remember, even in issues outside of the LGBTQ plus community, is I do try to keep in mind that acceptance goes a long way. Not alienating the person, not isolating them, trying to let them know, hey, it's okay. I accept you for who you are. And so I found that that's very helpful. And as it says, LGBTQ plus youth who feel accepted and safe are 40% less likely to attempt suicide. And so that alone, and that one accepting adult, obviously in an ideal situation, it's a parent or family member, but it can be a counselor, it can be a teacher, it can be a family friend, anything of that sort. At least one accepting adult, 10%, that's huge. And then, the 40% less likely to attempt is huge, So moving right along here, let's talk about bullying. Let's get back to that first point. So many of you have probably heard the term. It kind of became popularized by Katy Perry's song, the phrase rather, "That's so gay." It seems like a more or less, not meaning to be totally offensive statement, but what it really means is, gay is in there instead of stupid or dumb or pretty much anything negative. And so that is something that gets said a lot when it comes to bullying. In fact, as you can see on the right side of the screen there, almost 100% of students report hearing homophobic or transphobic language in their school. And of course, of that 99%, 96% report feeling distressed as a result. So think about it. If, something that you identify with, maybe you identify with a certain type of music, maybe you identify with a sport, maybe you identify, in some other type of thing. If somebody started using "that's so blank," right? That would be, you hear that enough and you start to feel pretty bad. Of course, I'm going to depress you all first in the beginning here with all of these stats, but I promise there is hope. 70% of students experience some type of verbal harassment, so being called names or threatened in school. And then you can kind of see the numbers from there, 25% being physically harassed, pushed or shoved. And then on a more serious level, 11% reported being physically assaulted. So this is, punched, kicked, beat up, things like that. So bullying is no joke here, and things like "that's so gay" or other little statements are definitely said, in schools. And sometimes kids don't recognize why this is important not to use those words. But as a clinician, I try to correct people as a parent, correcting people as a teacher. If again, going back to, an accepting adult. If someone, a youth, a student sees you, correcting an individual that's saying, oh, that's okay, that's this, or using other offensive language, that shows some acceptance, and the kids need to hear this. They need to know this. They need to understand that you are in their corner. You're willing to accept them for who they are. And they obviously deal with it enough, in school, but family, other places, continuing along the lines of bullying, homophobic and transphobic languages everywhere. So going real quick, there's this website called nohomophobe.com that I'm going to try to pull up. And, obviously there are some offensive words on here, but just for today, it's not even 10 o'clock. You can see this website. They track use on Twitter and other social medias of homophobic or transphobic language. So you can see, almost 1,500 for the F word. You can see it, obviously the F word, you can understand what I mean there. 966 for so gay, 581 for no homo, and 431 for the D word. And so, that's pretty significant. And I realize that you guys probably are not actually seeing that, but there's the link in the website right here. It says nohomophobes.com. And so, later on in the day, I'd encourage you all to check it out. It gets pretty high. As I was, doing the research for this, I remember there was one day where I think one of those numbers was almost 5,000, which I couldn't believe. That was just wild to me. And so it's really important. Language matters. And so bullying, is one of the biggest things that we can prevent as clinicians, as teachers, as adults in children's lives. One of the things that is a risk, most of the LGBTQ plus people that die by suicide are bullied beforehand. In fact, 5 times more than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. So, what you say really matters. And, each episode of victimization, so whether that's verbal, physical abuse, increases even just self-harming behavior by 2.5 times on average. So, some of the risk factors that you may or may not know for suicide prevention already are other forms of self-harm, whether that's cutting, whether that's, other types of self-sabotaging, whether that's isolating, things of that nature. And so keeping that in mind, bullying is a huge problem, and it's really important for us to correct that. 60% of students reported feeling nearly 60% report actually feeling unsafe in schools because of their, sexual orientation, their gender identity, or their gender expression. Real quickly, for those of you that don't know the differences between those 3 terms, orientation is more related to the people that you're attracted to, right? So a homosexual orientation is attracted to people of the same sex. A bisexual orientation to people of either sex, that type of thing. Gender identity is how you personally identify. So, for example, I identify as cisgender, meaning I look and act like a female. I was born a female. That's my gender identity. And gender expression is, what types of clothing you wear, style your hair, those types of things. And so just for those of you, if you don't know that, you're, some good information to have, because a lot of the even kind of letters of the alphabet soup of LGBTQ plus can get a bit confusing for people. So it's important just to have a little refresher here. So now, of course, the question is like, okay, but, hey, Brittany, I'm not really hearing people use all these words and misgender people or call people names. So you probably do know someone who's gay. This is based on the most recent census. And so that's why, of course, it only goes 18 and up. But as you can kind of see, 72 plus 5% of people identify as LGBTQ, 52 to 71, 7%, 35 to 51, 12%, and then 18 to 34, that's 20%. That's almost a quarter of people, and then when you look at the total population, it's 12. And as you guys may know through your own experiences, more and more people are becoming comfortable to come out. So I'm happy about that. so we can be supportive for them. But that number for below 18 might actually be more than 20%, would be my guess. I don't know what you guys think, but that would be my guess. Going back to this, how to talk to trans people, right? A lot of times people aren't really sure how to talk to someone who's gay or trans. And the truth of it is you just want to talk as you would to anyone. LGBTQ plus individuals are normal individuals. It's unfortunate that they're kind of picked on and pointed out in our society, because the truth of it is it really shouldn't matter. So I have a very brief 5-minute TED Talk here by Jackson Bird, who's a trans individual, and I just thought it was such a great way for people to kind of understand it's normal. Don't ask like a bunch of questions. Don't think a lot of differentness. Talk to them like you would anyone. You don't have to overthink it. So I'm going to briefly play this. Please let me know if you have any issues hearing it. Here, I'm going to put the volume all the way up.
Hi, I'm Jack, and I'm transgender. Let me take a guess at some of the thoughts that might be running through your head right now. Transgender, wait, does that mean that they're actually a man or actually a woman? I wonder if he's had the surgery yet. Oh, now I'm looking at his crotch. Look to the right, that's a safe place to look. Yes, I knew it. No real man has hips like those. My friend's daughter is transgender. I wonder if they know each other. Oh my gosh, he is so brave. I would totally support his right to use the men's bathroom. Wait, but how does he use the bathroom? How does he have sex? Okay, let's stop those types of questions before we get too close for my comfort. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did come here today to share my personal experiences being transgender, but I did not wake up this morning wanting to tell an entire audience about my sex life. I mean, of course, that's the problem with being trans, right? People are pretty much always wondering how we have sex and what kind of equipment we're working with below the belt. Being trans is awkward. And not just because the gender I was assigned at birth mismatches the one I really am. Being trans is awkward because everyone else gets awkward when they're around me. People who support me and all other trans people wholeheartedly are often so scared to say the wrong thing, so embarrassed to not know what they think they should, that they never ask. And part of what was so nerve-wracking about coming out as transgender was knowing that people wouldn't know what I meant. And when someone comes out as gay, people know what that means. But when you come out as trans, you have to face the misconceptions that will color other people's impressions of you even after you've educated them. And you will have to educate them. When I came out, I wrote a 10-page encyclopedic document with a zip file attachment of music and videos that I sent to every single person I came out to. And I kept in my email signature for months afterwards, because you also don't ever stop coming out. And I came out to the accountants helping with my taxes, and the TSA agents who didn't know which one of them should pat me down, the man or the woman. I mean, I just came out to everyone watching this. When I came out to my dad, to my great relief, he was totally cool with me being trans. But as soon as I started talking about physically transitioning, he freaked. And I quickly realized it was because he, like so many other people, think that physical transition means just one thing: the surgery. Now listen. If there were one magical surgery that could turn me into a tall, muscular, societally perfect image of a man overnight, I'd sign up in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, it isn't that simple. There are dozens of different gender-affirming surgeries, from chest surgeries to bottom surgeries to facial feminization and man sculpting. Many trans people will only ever undergo one procedure in their lifetime, if that. Maybe because they don't personally feel the need, but also because they're expensive, and health insurance is only beginning to cover them. Instead, the first step for a trans person seeking physical transition is usually hormone replacement therapy. Hormones are why I have a deeper voice and some sparse whiskers on my neck and a giant pimple on my chin. Basically, they put you through a second puberty. It's a blast. Now, because our transitions are slower and steadier than historic misconceptions can lead people to believe, there can be some confusion about when to call someone by their new name and pronouns. There's no distinct point in physical transition at which a trans person becomes their true gender. As soon as they tell you their new name and pronouns, that's when you start using that name and pronouns. And I know it can be difficult to make the change. You might slip up here and there. I've slipped up myself with other trans people. But, I always think to myself, if we can change from calling Puff Daddy to P. Diddy, and if we apologize profusely when we've used the wrong gender pronoun for someone's pet cat, I think we can make the same effort for the real humans in our lives. Now, there is no topic that makes other people more awkward about trans people than public bathrooms. The bathrooms, the latest political flashpoint for LGBT opponents. Here's a fun fact about bathrooms. More US congressmen have been convicted of assaulting someone in a public bathroom than trans people have been. Now, the truth is, we trans people are so much more scared of you than you are of us. It is a huge point of discussion in trans communities about which bathroom to start using and when, so we don't attract attention that could lead to violence against us. I personally started using the men's room when I started getting confused and frightened looks in the women's room, even though I was petrified to start going into the men's room. And often we opt to just not go to the bathroom at all. A 2015 national survey of trans people found that 8% of us had had a urinary tract infection in the past year as a result of avoiding restrooms. These bathroom bills aren't protecting anyone. All they're doing is ensuring that when trans people are assaulted in bathrooms, the law will no longer be on our side when we report it. Being trans means a daily onslaught of these misconceptions. And I have it pretty easy. I am a white, able-bodied guy sitting nearly at the peak of Privilege Mountain. For non-binary people, for trans women, for trans people of color, it is so much harder. So I've given you a starter pack of trans knowledge that I hope will lead to more learning on your own. Talk to trans people. Listen to us. Amplify our voices. Take the heat off of us and educate those around you so we don't have to every time. Maybe someday when I say, "Hi, I'm Jack and I'm transgender," the only response I'll get is, "Hi, nice to meet you." Thank you.
Pausing that here, but don't normally show the whole video in a lot of things, but I thought that this video in particular was just really important and also pretty funny. The basic point: talk to people like they're normal. Talk to trans people like they're normal. Talk to gay people like they're normal. Talk to queer people like they're normal. Non-binary people. Pretty much whatever identity someone identifies with, treat them as regularly as you can. However, don't be afraid to ask questions either if you're unsure, but you don't want to make it awkward, kind of as Jackson said in there. So you can find that on YouTube. It's a TED Talk, How to Talk and Listen to Transgender People. If you want to share that with people, you're more than welcome to. But I just think it's a great little segment, a little bit of humor on just how to talk to people, right? So we know, don't bully them, but then how do you talk to them? You talk to them like you talk to anyone else. So that's the thing to note. Specifically with trans people, that has become more of a topic as of recently. One thing to be aware of is just by using a trans person's name, that can actually decrease depression, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts or contemplation. So for example, if someone comes out to you as transgender, meaning, they're born maybe one sex or gender and they're identifying as another sex or gender. And they say, "Hey, instead of calling me Brittany, I'd like you to call me Bradley." Okay, call them that. And like, Jackson said, there's no time that, you shouldn't start, and I'd like you to refer to me by these pronouns. And when in doubt, someone's like, "Oh yeah, I identify in the LGBTQ plus community," and you're not really sure what that means or what that's about, say, "Okay, well, how should I refer to you, or what, pronouns should I use?" And that alone makes people feel so much better. It makes them feel really affirmed. So kind of as you saw across home, school, work, and friends, when people are being addressed by the proper name, they feel a lot better. And in school use, specifically of an affirmed name, decreases suicidal ideation by nearly 30% and decreases that suicidal behavior by 56%. So part of suicide prevention is just treating people in kindly and trying to be as affirming as possible. It means so much to an LGBTQ plus individual when that's even brought up. What is your sexual orientation? What are your pronouns? That means a lot to people. How should I refer to you? If they identify as trans. So those are some really, really important things to be aware of. So what do we do, right? I told you I was going to teach you some type of tool in terms of managing, like really participating in suicide prevention. So we care. And this acronym, CARE, is specifically from the Trevor Project. So I want to give them credit where credit is due. So the C being connect, the A being ask, the R being respond, and the E being empower. Not only, obviously the acronym here, but caring also, show people that you care. As I was saying, you want to treat people in the way that, you would want to be treated. You want to show people, hey, I really do care about what you have to say. I care about you as a person. I want to help you, and in whatever way that is. And I mean, as the video that Jackson Bird had said, we all slip up. I would be completely lying to you if I didn't occasionally slip up on a gender or an identity or accidentally use a wrong name. And we're all human, right? But the biggest thing is showing that you actually care about this person's well-being. You want them to be doing okay. You want to help reduce their depression and their suicide rate. You don't want that to happen to them. And so, not only caring actually, but also doing these 4 steps can make just a tremendous difference. So getting in more into detail here, connect, right? So what do I mean by that, right? We can all say, okay, Brittany, care, got it. What does that mean? So the first thing is, if you notice any warning signs of suicide, like changes in attitude or behavior, try to reach out. If, for example, you have a student in your classroom that maybe they're normally a pretty bubbly or outgoing person, and one day they just kind of come in with their shoulders slumped, looking down, like they don't look like, they're not acting like themselves. Then maybe just be like, hey, how are things going? Or maybe see if you can pull them aside after class and just ask them, are you doing okay? That's, again, back to kind of caring. You really want to be a warm, compassionate individual. And the same thing, I'm not saying everybody that walks in that has their shoulders slumped looking down is depressed, but that's usually a pretty good sign. The body language matters a lot. But let's say you have a shy individual who pretty much always comes in looking down. If that's not really a change from like their baseline, like what's regular, you can still, it never hurts to reach out and be like, hey, are you doing okay? But be aware specifically for changes in the attitude or behavior. And attitude can easily just be like negative statements, like no one likes me, this school's so homophobic, I'm not feeling like it's worth it. What's the point? Those types of things. And the behavior can, warning signs for suicide in terms of behavior are usually depressed behavior, isolating, not acting as themselves, not being as social as they typically are, maybe not doing things that they enjoy as much, tearfulness, things of that nature. The warning signs of suicide usually are, symptoms of depression, but not always. Sometimes people will not really act all that different. So I do have to say, when in doubt, reach out. When you have any concern about, someone's mental health, even not on suicide prevention, even on anxiety, on anything, it certainly doesn't hurt to be like, hey, what's going on? Are you doing okay? This could even be a coworker or colleague if you see somebody and you just want to check in. Checking in with people is such an underrated, quick thing that everyone can do. Now, of course, the key here, though, being non-judgmental. LGBTQ plus people get enough judgment from pretty much everyone around them. Kind of, as I already kind of highlighted with a lot of those statistics, school is probably, unfortunately, one of the biggest places, but also, with your family members, in therapy, what have you, be non-judgmental. That's part, especially in therapy, that's part of why they're there. They want to be in a place where they're not judged. They want to be accepted. And it's important for that individual to know that you're actually, that you are there and you're listening. So with this connection, it has to be genuine, right? You can't just do it like, oh, okay, so-and-so looks a little bit sad. I guess I better be like, hey, are you doing okay? No, you've gotta be involved here, right? And I know we all get burnt out, we all get tired, we all go through things. But when you see somebody else that has exhibited some changes that aren't typical for them, really check in, really show them like, hey, I do care about you, I'm concerned for you, and listen to what they have to say, right? A lot of times suicide, is something that is termed, and maybe many of you have heard this, right, is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. There's always a problem that typically will trigger suicidal thoughts. Now, what that problem is, it might be LGBTQ plus specific, like, oh, my family doesn't accept me, my boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with me, my friend, I came out and it didn't go very well. But it can also be things that any client or person with depression might be going through. Well, I lost my job, people are saying I'm weird, I'm being bullied for being weird, pretty much, anything that is a problem for that individual. And you want to show just that you're listening and trying to, hear them out. So you can see I've got that cute little picture there, free hugs. I know during COVID, physical interactions have not really been, approved, we'll say, but maybe as things are returning to normal, it certainly doesn't hurt to ask, would you like a hug? And I always say ask because some people are not, comfortable with physical touch. And then also that way, you show them that you're interested in helping. But even just that question, hey, can I give you a hug? Even as you think of it, you might get like a feeling of warmth, like, wow, that person asking me that really means that they care, so that is connecting, that's the first step. You got to build a rapport with this person. And sometimes when people are really depressed, they can be a little bit resistant to people showing that they care, and so don't give up on that. Really, try not to get frustrated with them. Really try to figure out what's going on. Like, what's, you're not seeming like yourself. What's going on? Can I help you? Or, if I'm not the person to help you, is there somebody else that you'd like to talk to? And so that's very important. Next is ask, right? So we got the C, connect, ask. Once you've actually made that genuine connection, like I said, not just this is part of my job. Hey, how you doing? Are you doing okay? Don't be afraid to ask directly. It's one of the most common misconceptions about suicide prevention across the board. It's like, oh, if I ask them, will that give them the idea? I promise you, no. You should ask them directly, because if you ask them directly, they're much more likely to answer, right? Like if somebody is just kind of, exhibiting the signs of depression, like I said, tearful, maybe head down, maybe, just not seeing themselves, and you don't ask that, they're probably already thinking it. You can just ask them and then you know what to do. So a lot of times suicide itself, that word can be very triggering. So a lot of times I will word it in terms of like, are you thinking about killing yourself? And I try to be as, not reactive to that as possible. I know, for a lot of us, it can be quite a shock. It can be the idea of like, oh gosh, like, what if they say yes, right? asking the question doesn't promote suicidal thinking, and it reduces suicide risk. When you ask directly, it lets them know that you're comfortable, right? You don't want to overreact. You don't want to be like, oh my goodness, you are like, we've got to get you to the hospital immediately, or like you don't want to freak out, and that's of course one of the hardest things for most people, especially if you haven't had a lot of exposure to individuals who are suicidal, is the idea that, okay, if they say yes, what do I do? And that's where the rest comes in play. Don't worry, you're not going to leave today's webinar without having some ideas of what to do if a person says yes to that question. But the most important thing is connecting and asking that question. Because if you don't ask, you'll never know. And if you don't ask, you can't really prevent suicide without asking about it, right? That's just kind of like avoiding some type of elephant in the room. And so, it's important to ask that question. So the next thing is R, right? So we've got connect, ask, respond, right? And if the person opens up, and I apologize for the typo there, honor their trust by responding with compassion and empathy. So you ask someone, hey, are you doing okay? And they're like, no, not really. Are you thinking about killing yourself? And they say yes. First off, number one, thank them for opening up to you. They didn't have to tell you the honest truth. A lot of times when people are in such a depressed state, they question other people's goodness, and the goodness in the world. And so it's really important to say, really, like, thank you for letting me know that, like, I'm here to help. They need to know that you are there to help them, and you're going to be as kind as possible. So even, the issues, like I said, even if you haven't necessarily experienced in them yourself, being empathetic. So if you have a client or a student who, you go through the C and the A and you respond, like, let's say they say, well, my girlfriend broke up with me today. Whether you've been through that experience or not, although my guess is that most of us have at some point in our lives, say, wow, I'm really sorry that happened. Thank you for letting me know, like, how you're feeling. Like, let's try to keep you safe. There are options here. You don't have to do this alone. Sometimes that's all people really need to know, is that they're not alone, that somebody cares about them, and that they're not alone in dealing with whatever stressor or trigger that it is. And if it's something that you haven't been through, a lot of clients that I've worked with, a very simple word you kind of want to be aware of, rather than I understand, right? So if, for example, you're somebody that doesn't identify with the LGBTQ plus community, and your client or student does, and they're like, oh, I'm being bullied for being gay, and you're like, oh yeah, I understand. No, you don't. And you may have some ideas about it, and you may have been bullied in your own ways, but the key is saying, I can imagine that's really hard, or wow, that must be really difficult. Sharing with them, like, your interest in helping them, and not trying to dismiss that feeling. Sometimes, especially with youth, sometimes things can be said a bit impulsively. However, you still want to take it seriously, and you want to say, hey, I'm really glad that you shared this. And reminding them that there's options available. You want to put them, put safety first always in this situation. Any of us, and I hope this never happens to any of us, would never want a situation where you didn't take something like this seriously. So the biggest thing is connecting that person to what's called a safety plan, which includes safe people, places, and interventions. So you can see my little suicide prevention month thing there. They're reminding these people that there are options, right? When you feel depressed, there are options. Like, you don't have to give up. There are other ways to solve these problems. And so on the next slide, I actually have an example of a safety plan, not directly, but we can kind of go through that. And this is actually a template that I personally use pretty much whenever anyone exhibits any type of suicidal ideation. I do this to help them recognize their options. When people are depressed, it can be very difficult for them to even think of the coping skills that they need to get through this, or to even, really plan out how to get better, So this is a patient safety plan template. It's got 6 steps. The actual 6th one is not on here, but I'll get to that. So step 1, your warning signs, right? Thoughts, images, mood, situation, behavior that a crisis may be developing, right? So these are the things that we've already talked about when you're, connecting. When you notice a change in attitude or behavior, likely that's probably one of these warning signs. Step 2, internal coping strategies. So things they can do to take their mind off their problem without necessarily contacting another person. So I'm sure, at Family Recovery Center, using DBT, mindfulness is a big one. Being aware, being present, maybe doing some mindful breathing. Radical acceptance is another one, trying to just accept it is what it is, trying to find ways to cognitively restructure a little bit. For a lot of my teens, these internal coping skills are playing some music, playing a video game, going on a walk. And so these things can be really anything, as long as it's something that person can do on their own. And it even has some examples there too, because if the other person is depressed and you're not that familiar with their coping strategies, or maybe you're not that familiar with them, just trying to kind of come up with some ideas, like how do you cope with a tough situation? So then, step 3, people in social settings that provide distraction. So not people that maybe are trained in suicide prevention necessarily, or that, necessarily know what to do, but people that are helpful and distracting. So a friend, right? With youth, you don't, you're not expecting their best friend to be their suicide prevention plan, but, part of it is hanging out with their best friend may distract them. Places may distract them, right? Like, okay, well, maybe when I'm in my room, all I have to do is think and be, sad about things. And so maybe if I get out into the living room and hang out with my family, maybe there's a favorite place that they have, a park, an ice cream shop, maybe it's even just, for some of the older teens, I'd like to go for a drive. And with that, it's always important to assess, though, like what their plan is. Someone shares with you, oh yeah, I am kind of feeling like harming myself. And, to be honest, I'm thinking about, kind of just driving into oncoming traffic. Yeah, no, don't have them get in a car, not alone anyways. And so use some common sense here. But when in doubt, just ask them, like, hey, are you safe, to drive? It's always important to ask some of these things. And step 4, people whom I can ask for help. So these are typically going to be more of a core responsible parties, or people that are trained in suicide prevention. So that can be a mom, a dad, an aunt, a teacher, a school counselor, a therapist, a group therapist, those types of things. And I really like this template because it also has phone number, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have anyone's phone numbers memorized anymore. So it's kind of helpful to have it all in one spot. And a lot of times I'll also repeat, the clinician side, because as you see that step 5, clinician name. So their primary therapist, how do you get a hold of them, right? And then, the local urgent care services, the local hospital, and then even this plan has a suicide prevention number. There are text lines and call lines that are available on trevorproject.org that we can kind of go to in a little bit, but that's something just to be aware of. And then the step 6, which there just wasn't room on the slide to show you all, is, what is your reason to live? Come up with just one reason. And, that's huge, and sometimes it can take a while to get up to that one reason. But, the safety plan, it's just a template, but I find this is so helpful. after a session where I have some concerns about suicidal ideation, if I've done this form with a client and I've informed their parents or their other responsible parties, and if I have a reasonable belief that they haven't thought of a plan or don't have the intent to act on this today, this is such a great tool. However, I say that, and when in doubt, refer people to the hospital to get further treatment, because I'd rather have somebody be safe, even if they're a little upset with me for that decision, than not. But having a safety plan is it's huge. It empowers people. It gets people to understand, hey, there's things I can do, which of course leads me to the E part of care, which is empowering, right? Again, like I said, letting people know there's something you can do. You have options. Treatment is available. Talk to your doctor, those types of things. Talking openly, of course, is that first great step. When you can get somebody to open up with you and share, like, yeah, I am kind of, thinking about harming myself, to be honest with you. I know that doesn't seem like suicide prevention, just getting them to talk about it, but so many people suffer in silence. And so, it really is so important just to talk openly, get them talking, get them, connecting with you, showing them that you genuinely care about their well-being. But like I said, the next step is connecting them to information and support that will help them improve their situation, right? So going back to that example that I had from earlier, let's say they are like, well, like my girlfriend broke up with me and I'm really sad. Maybe there's like a GSA at your school. Maybe that would be a helpful place where people can understand their supports. Maybe there's a, like breakup and grief group of some type. Or maybe if they're upset about something else, maybe they're feeling suicidal because their biggest support, maybe the most accepting person in their life, passed away. A grief group. Family recovery centers has some great, family-oriented groups and programs. I've had a few clients go there, and so even referring there, right? The biggest thing, though, is reminding your person that is exhibiting some type of suicidal ideation that they're not alone in navigating the stress, the mental health, and the thoughts of suicide. There's still a lot of stigma when it comes to suicide, which is why it's so important to not react, because I think most of us do kind of react. We're like, oh, like, what do I do? But the idea is, reminding them, hey, I'm here to help you. We've done this safety plan. Look at all these people that are here to help you. Look at all these things you can do. It's not as fatalistic as you think. It's not as this is the only option as you think. And helping them really find some ways to problem solve. And what's great about this care acronym is this is meant for lay people. You don't have to be a trained therapist to connect, ask, respond, and empower, right? If you have somebody in your personal life that is sharing that they're thinking of suicide, that's where, that respond, you don't have to do a safety plan as a friend. You're not gonna be like, oh, wait, I went to this webinar on Wednesday. I've got this plan. Let's do this together. Obviously refer them to a professional, but you can still use these basic steps. Reminding that person, hey, you're not alone. Let's get you to a therapist. Let's get you to an intense outpatient program. Let's get you to the hospital just to make sure you're safe. That's, it doesn't have to all fall on you. Sometimes people will become a little over responsible for others in this situation, but reminding them that they're not alone. Like, everybody experiences stress, and mental health issues are common, and thoughts of suicide are more common than you think, and so kind of like how to talk to trans people, how to talk to suicidal people is not being too awkward about it, trying to treat them as normally as much as you would want, to be treated in that situation. And again, I'll probably repeat this another 10 times before this webinar is over. And, be affirming, be accepting, reminding the people that, hey, you can lean on this established, this affirming support system, who could be trusted adults. It could be that, even, yourself is a form of support, self-care, coping skills, things like that. Obviously, myself as a mental health therapist, I'm always referencing back to, well, hey, remember when you had that hard day and you decided, you know what, I'm probably, feeling really sad, but what would be best for me is to go on a walk, play with my dog, whatever. Like, I try to remind people of the things that they do that are good, that are helping them, feel better. Depression is one of those things that really makes people's world seem smaller. And so what this empower piece is so important, because that's where you open up somebody's world. That's where you say, hey, there's more out there for you. It's not always going to be like this. It's kind of crazy to think, even, when it comes to, gay marriage being legalized. I think, what was that, 2013, I think, when DOMA was overturned. That was such a huge thing for the LGBTQ plus community. And some people never thought that was going to happen, not in their lifetime, right? And so reminding people that things can change, empower them. And that, that's how that really happened, is everybody felt empowered. There was a big movement, pro LGBTQ plus. And right now, a lot of the focus is on a big movement of using the proper pronouns for trans individuals, and just reminding people that things change, and reminding them they're not alone, and reminding them they have the skills to get through this, no matter how terrible whatever they're going through seems. And like I said, trying to empathize, hey, wow, that must be really hard, or I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, or, thank you for opening up to me. Thank you for telling me about this. It doesn't have to be anything, that, groundbreaking. You don't have to say, okay, well, this is the specific DBT skill I'm going to use to intervene in this situation and help keep this person safe. It doesn't have to be all of that. I mean, those things are helpful. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason that the techniques used in DBT and other types of therapy are valuable. But bottom line, when it comes to this, caring, connecting, asking, responding, and empowering, when you can help someone believe in themselves, help someone believe in their own ability to get better, to beat this depression, no matter what they're going through, whether it's non-acceptance, whether it's breakups, whether it's figuring out their identity. I've worked with a number of LGBTQ plus clients, because it's something that I specialize in, and I can't tell you, how many have really just struggled in that kind of coming out process with themselves. Internalized homophobia is a common term, meaning that, hey, you're homophobic, kind of as you're recognizing that perhaps you identify in that community. And so, I always encourage people to refer to a licensed therapist that specializes in LGBTQ plus issues, because they can help them with these things. So, if you don't remember anything else I've said, care, and you can look it up. The Trevor Project website is amazing. It has a lot of wonderful tools. So I know many of you might be teachers or might be somehow involved in the school systems. So I've made sure to add a few things in terms of best practices for school. So one of the biggest things that I've even tried to identify, improve is language, semantics, and what you say shares with people before you say anything, how you feel about things. So adopting gender neutral language. So a great example, ladies and gentlemen, right? This is assuming people are female or male, and there's no in between. But the truth is that there's a ton of things in between. And so a great way to kind of switch that up is, folks, or, in schools, right? Girls line up here, boys line up here, boys and girls be quiet. All right, folks, come on, kids, what have you. Although kids, you might, depending on how old the teens are, you might upset them a little bit. But gender neutral language, folks, kiddos, people, humans is a common one. Like a lot of the kids I work with will reference like, oh, I'm a happy human, or this is my person, you know. And so that's a good way to identify. And even for adults, I don't ever assume somebody's got a husband or a wife. I say spouse, and I try to get information from there. As I was saying in the beginning, react and respond to all homophobic and transphobic language. Let's, other students know that that's not okay with you. Even if you don't think you have a gay student, or a trans student or a queer student, or, anything in the LGBTQ plus kind of, I call it alphabet soup, right? You never really know, because you probably, as I said, you probably know somebody that's gay or trans, and you may not know it. And one of the ways you can show that you're an accepting or affirming adult is by not allowing homophobic or transphobic language in your school, in your hallways, in your classroom. And it's something as simple as just saying, hey, that's not okay. Please don't use that language. I definitely encourage the start of a GSA club. As you guys know, I work at Barrington Behavioral Health and Wellness, and the Barrington GSA that they have is great. They meet on a regular basis, and it's a place where a lot of these kids can just feel not weird, not different. They feel accepted. They feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Again, not being alone is a big piece of suicide prevention. So, I would encourage the start of a GSA club. Even, extra A+ is, if you're a sponsor for that club, and posting safe space signs throughout the school. That's one thing that the Barrington GSA has just done a wonderful job of. The sponsor of that organization has encouraged teachers to put signs, and I think they have GSA shirts as well. And like I said, these kids may not come out to you, but if you post that you're a safe space, or if you're wearing, like a GSA shirt or rainbow flag or something like that, that lets them know, like, oh, okay, that person can understand me. That person will support me, And so it's so important just to have outward signs of affirmation, and don't worry about upsetting anybody else or what have you. The point is about suicide prevention in this case, but also just, mental health improvement. Another best practice is ensuring all facilities have private changing areas available. Now, I realize that we are all, limited by, the architecture of our buildings. And so I recognize that that's not always a possibility. That's why these are the best practices, but I know that's not always a possibility. But even when there can be, a stall or an area, as Jackson Bird said in, his speech, he eventually went to the male bathrooms, but that was only when he started feeling extra uncomfortable in the female bathrooms, but he didn't feel ready for the male bathrooms yet. And then creating a gender support plan for transgender or non-binary students. What is a gender support plan, you're asking? What that is basically a plan to assist the school in affirming that person's gender, whether it's non-binary or whether it's, masculine or feminine. And it's about using the affirmed name, the correct pronouns, ensuring they have bathroom access, gym, changing access. And in the end, there's a list of resources I have, and actually Illinois.gov. There's a specific link in this that has an example of a gender support plan and goes into a little bit more detail. And then last but not least, provide ongoing training for all staff. Everybody needs to be informed of this. I'm so happy that you are all here to learn about this and to get some training and to understand a little bit more of how to help LGBTQ plus individuals. But, take this knowledge, what you learned today, even if it's not a CEU for someone else, share what you've learned today. Even if you share that with one person, like especially the CARE acronym, I think that's one of the most helpful things. And it's so easy, it's so simple to keep in mind. But when it comes to that, just even sharing that can make a big difference. So just share anything you learned today, even that TED Talk. I'll tell you, when I first came upon that TED Talk, I probably must have shown 20, 25 people in it, it just helps everyone, it helps everyone be more aware of like, hey, you know what, I don't have to be thinking about, did they have this surgery? Are they a boy or a girl? Are they this? I don't have to ask them all that questions. So it's always good to get training. And, even in, the past few years, things have changed a lot. When I was coming up, there wasn't a term of non-binary. You were queer, you were like LGBT or Q, which could be queer or questioning, right? And now there's a lot more language. There's demisexual, which means is kind of a form of bisexual. There's demi-romantic, which means romantically you're interested in both sexes. There's all sorts of terminology out there, and even I'm constantly learning. There's always more to learn about this topic, and it's changing as our culture is changing as well. So, please, just find ways to learn more. And so, like I said, you all are here, so A+ to you guys. You guys are already learning some things today. Hopefully, finding some things that you can use in your own school or practice, what have you. And these are things that sometimes, ask questions of your clients, of your students. If they bring something up you don't know, just ask. For example, I once had an asexual client say, "Oh yeah, I had a squish on somebody," and I'd never heard that terminology before, and so I was like, "What do you mean by that?" I don't want to seem insensitive or not understanding, and they were more than happy that I asked them to explain it. Which, for those of you who know, I'll share this knowledge. A squish is a semi romantic interest in somebody, but not to the point of wanting to date them or anything else. It's kind of like a younger kid's term for like a crush, but not really wanting anything more like a crush / friendship type thing. And so it's so important just to ask questions. And even I, it's something I specialize in, but I don't know it all. And there's always more to learn. And so when in doubt, also ask. Here are a ton of the resources I was talking about. So I probably name dropped the Trevor Project probably 20 times at least today. That is just such a huge resource. As I said, the terminology bit, that second one is from GLAD, and it's the Allies Guide to Terminology. And that's a PDF that you can print out, you can share with colleagues. How to be a straight ally, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline has. And I'm going over all of these because I think that sometimes people don't really realize, there's a lot of information out there, but also there's a lot of misinformation out there. So all of these I've vetted and used myself as well. And these are not only resources I used in creating this presentation, but also resources for you all. And I believe the PowerPoint will be sent to all the attendees via email. But if not, you're also welcome to reach out to me directly. And so there's the It Gets Better project, which is just a project of mostly celebrities actually sharing that, hey, things are going to be okay. And just getting that hope to kids, especially, that, hey, it's not always going to be this difficult. Life isn't always going to be this hard. It will get better. You just got to wait it out, There's GL Sun, that, the gay and lesbian, and gosh, I'm not even remembering what the SUN stands for, but another great resource. Then that next one, the ISBE, guidance supporting transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming students. That has that gender support plan I was referencing earlier, so that's so important. PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Gays and Lesbians. There is a very active chapter out in McHenry that I have found has been just a great support to many of the parents of my LGBTQ plus students. And so that's something, I think they meet the last Wednesday of every month in the evening. They have a support group, and so I would definitely encourage you to go to that. One thing that's actually not listed here is NAMI of Barrington also has an LGBTQ plus support group that I'm always encouraging people to go to. And then last couple of things here, an Affirming and Inclusive Schools Task Force report. That's at illinois.gov. It shares a little bit more about how if you're a teacher in the school system, you can be affirming and inclusive. Like I said, that's one of the biggest things you can do to prevent LGBTQ plus suicide. And then Youth Outlook is a local organization, I believe, based in Wheaton, and they also have a number of groups and resources for people. I had referenced the It Gets Better project, and so I was hoping we'd have time, which we do, for a very short video. It's about 2 minutes, and it's kind of a like a montage, if you will, of a lot of celebrities letting people know to have some hope. It does get better, and that's, suicide prevention wise, you can't get any better than trying to instill a sense of hope. And I see that someone in the chat said, thank you for the resource list. Absolutely, I'm happy to share those. I know it's something I've built over the years to find the right resources. So here's that It Gets Better video. And like I said, it's just a real short one, but it's a good one.
It gets better. You are not alone.
And so I can now say that I'm queer and proud.
Those things that people tease me about, they are absolutely true. And they're what make me fabulous and amazing.
There are so many people out there that want to love and support you. So just look for that community. You can find people. It's going to be okay.
I promise that it gets better. I know because I am you.
To see a viral campaign promoted and covered on MTV was really meaningful. It helped me get into LGBT activism.
Working with It Gets Better made me feel so confident. It made me feel like I had allies, and thank everybody who has ever made an It Gets Better video, because you have made a difference in somebody's life.
It Gets Better inspires all young people to accept themselves. It has helped countless insecure boys and girls become confident men and women.
These moments, if you allow them to, can strengthen your character, strengthen who you are as a person.
It's important for us to tell our stories and to be vocal, because this is how we affect the community.
You don't have to tell me I'm worthy anymore. We know we're worthy.
How can you possibly not be right if this is who you are? And someday, people are going to see that. You have to know that.
All right, so that's that video. Great. That's a short one, but they obviously have a ton out there. Like, there were clips, obviously, you saw, like, a lot of celebrities, Barack Obama, other folks. And so that's always a great thing. Anything that your students or your clients like, you can probably find It Gets Better video on of that person sharing a little bit. And, instilling that sense of hope is, so key, to helping prevent suicide, right? Because suicide is a state of hopelessness that it won't get better. But the truth of it is, it will get better. It's hard right now. It's difficult right now, but it will get better. And you want to remind, the people that you're working with that it does. And that, part of that is just even in talking to you, and that you are being affirming and understanding and just, willing to work with them and to understand, as a whole. And so I love the It Gets Better project as well. It's another great resource for people. So, and again, another little short video here. Hold on here. It's not allowing me to go. There we go. No, always got to be some technological difficulty in these things. So thank you so much, for everyone that has attended today. I want to open up a little bit of time here for Q&A if anyone has any specific questions or anything, that you might find, you might just want to ask me personally or professionally. Also on the right side of this slide, you may see that I have the barringtonbhw.com, which is our website. You know, I'm not the only clinician there. We actually have a panel, I believe, of 18 or 19 therapists. All of them have received various trainings from me, and many of them are LGBTQ plus affirming. There's also some that are, you know, religious or spiritual counselors as well. We have a Facebook. I specifically have an Instagram, a professional Instagram. My handle is B Salvador LCPC. I'm always kind of trying to post some things that are LGBTQ plus friendly and just generally resources for everyone, you know, and of course free. That's always the important thing. Who doesn't love a free resource? And to that, I definitely want to thank the Family Recovery Center for having me here, as well as IMCA as well. So any questions that anyone might have? I know it's a lot of information we've kind of gone over today. This is just a topic so near and dear to my heart, and I really want everyone to feel like they got the most that they could out of this. You see here in the chat, thanks for sharing the information. Can't wait to look further into those resources. Absolutely. And if you guys have any questions, you know, my contact information is also on that Barrington BHW website. And, you know, as you're looking into the resources, I'm happy to help people through that. You know, thank you all for all the thanks. You know, that makes me feel so good to hear. But yeah, I'll open it up for questions and go for it. All right, it looks like we may not have any questions, which, hey, that is quite all right. You know, I know that, like I said, lots of information. If you don't remember anything else I said today, care, you know, literally, and not only that, but also with the acronym and just being affirming, you know, that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Brittany, so much. This was such a wonderful webinar and so informative. And I also, all of the resources I think are just absolutely wonderful for raising awareness and just having everyone that has participated have access to them. I think that that's a really awesome thing. So thank you again. It was really great.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone that joined us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then, you know, kind of a little plug that I have at the end is it is Pride Month. So all of you, if you can get out and participate in Pride in your local area, that means so much. You know, Barrington actually just this year, it's the first year they're proclaiming Pride as a village. And so that is a form of acceptance. So please get out there, participate in Pride, let people know that, hey, I affirm you as you. So.
Awesome. And with that, we will say happy Wednesday, guys, and we will see you for the next webinar.